Thanks for staying with us on The Real Story. A federal probe is underway in our state government. It centers on a former top budget official, Mr. Kosta Diamantis, and his role in construction projects around the state. We know the FBI is looking at his role, and we know that there are allegations out there that he pressured local and city officials to choose certain contractors for projects, specifically school construction projects, which he oversaw in Connecticut. This involved hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer funding. He no longer works for the state, the governor relieving him of his job as second in command at the budget office, and Mr. Diamantis retiring from his role overseeing school construction programs after being put on leave when all of this came to light. So several weeks ago, he came on The Real Story to defend himself and answer accusations out there. We did the entire show with him, so we felt like it was important to look at that interview and his responses with what we know about the investigation and the claims that are out there so far. So we want to bring back on Hartford Courant columnist Rennie, who has closely followed the investigation and the allegations out there. In fact, he was the one that broke the story. And he joins us on The Real Story once again. Kevin, welcome back on.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so first of all, just your reaction in general. Are you surprised that he spoke? He was on a media tour, right? So he spoke to the papers. He went on WTIC radio. This was the one TV interview he did, so we could kind of see his answers. He wanted to explain himself. Are you surprised?
I am surprised because so much of what we know contradicts what he maintained in these various interviews. There was a lot of diversion going on in his accounts. For instance, he spent a lot of time talking about the cost per foot of building a school and his involvement in some professional associations. But he did not give crisp, direct answers to a lot of your questions. And your questions were logical and not complicated. And for him, who has been involved in all these events, they should not have proved difficult to answer.
All right, so in the first part of the interview, as you said, he kind of just talked about some of his self-proclaimed successes that were out there with the school construction program, going over his dual roles that he had in state government. He talked about the moments that he was relieved of both of those positions and what that was like for him going through. And then we did get into some of the Stan Twardy report that's out there. Just as a reminder to everyone, and Kevin, correct me if my account on this is wrong, because it does get a little confusing, but once the state found out about the federal subpoena that was issued to the state, that's when the governor issued the Stan Twardy report, some of that also your reporting. Actually, I think the governor said specifically it was from your reporting that they did the Stan Twardy report as well. It was all happening around the same time, right? Yes,
the Twardy report was charged with investigating the hiring of Kosta Diamantis' daughter, Anastasia, for a well-paid job with the chief state's attorney. And she was hired directly by the chief state's attorney in what seemed like a really unusual series of events that included chief state's attorney seeking pay raises for himself and 15 colleagues at the time he hired Diamantis' daughter, Anastasia.
Okay, let's listen to this clip from the interview. Did you in any way orchestrate the hiring of your daughter in that case?
As I said in the Twardy report, and I'll say to you now again, the answer is no. I have not. I did not. That occurred amongst themselves and what they worked out. As a matter of fact, the report later goes and ends in the conclusion of credibility. I think it said of myself, my daughter, and Mr. Colangelo, and the chief state's attorney, Colangelo, as being credible. And the issue of credibility was the inability to remember when parties met again, or the first time.
They did say that there was some conflicting reports between you and Mr. Colangelo.
Well, I'm not sure what that conflicting report or information was.
All right, Kevin, so break that down for us a little. What was the report conclusion?
So the report concluded right from the start. It's 39 pages, and right from the start of the basic question of how did these people meet? And how did this whole job interview process, such as it was, get going? And And the Twardy report concluded that Mr. Diamantis, Mr. Colangelo, and Anastasia Diamantis lacked credibility concerning straightforward events and recollections. And there were convoluted explanations. For instance, they weren't able to on how Anastasia Diamantis got hired by a contractor that works on school construction. No one was able to shed any light on that, and on a matter that involved an unhappy employee for that same company making threats, and how did everyone learn about those threats? The accounts are a mass of confusion, and that's just, you see it throughout the report.
Yeah, and I know that later in the interview, or right after that, we had gone to commercial break. I did read the part that you were just talking about that we had just pulled up on our screen to Mr. Diamantis, and he kind of had said, well, using that as a bar for integrity, people trying to remember how they met 2 years ago didn't necessarily sit well with him. In our interview, he also said that the report shows there was no wrongdoing because Mr. Colangelo didn't get those pay raises, and Mr. Diamantis says that he was one of the people who denied him at one point those pay raises. But Kevin, this is where you say that his story and others get a little convoluted, right?
Yes. Well, so the legal conclusions of the Twardy report are not included in the Twardy report. The governor was presented those privately by Mr. Twardy. So we don't know what those are, and the governor has declined to share them with the public. But what we do know is that, for instance, on the issue of these raises, is that according to witnesses in state government, the professionals who are there, these are their careers. They're the ones who stopped these raises from going through. They continue to raise questions and obstacles so that it would appear what it looked like to a lot of other people, which was these raises were being sought and would have been awarded in some measure because of Mr. Colangelo hiring Anastasia Diamantis. And one of the state professionals who was part of this said that Mr. Colangelo was treated like no other agency head, and that Diamantis was, I believe it was, his quote was, like a pit bull with a pork chop in trying to get these raises done for Mr. Colangelo. And this was not the Twardy report was not a criminal investigation. We know other people are doing that, but this really, I think, offended everybody's sense of right and wrong and fairness and sound public policy in state government.
All right, let's get to another issue that we talked about here in the interview. This building committee in Tolland and this school in Tolland that needed to be rebuilt, the school impacted by crumbling foundations, right? And at the heart of the discussion is that this school got emergency status, and because of that, the bidding process for contractors was waived, and a construction company called D'Amato Construction from Bristol, which is Mr. Diamantis' hometown, ends up getting to do the rebuilding, even though they had, from what we can tell, no prior experience building a school. So let's listen to what this piece of sound from the interview. What made you think that they were a good fit, especially if it was emergency status?
You're asking me the question of why they were chosen. The question of why they were chosen is really one for the building committee and and the superintendent of schools. Okay. They choose who the builders are. I do not.
You do not. So you didn't have anything to do with the choosing of D'Amato Construction.
D'Amato Construction, or JCJ Architecture, or their construction administrator.
Okay, so again, just so everyone knows, he's saying that the building committee chose them. Kevin, you have something to say about this. You gave us a document that we wanted to show our viewers.
Right. So the document that I provided, I obtained from the town of Tolland, and it shows that on January 24th, 2019, which was 8 days after Commissioner Melody Curry certified an emergency and waived bidding for the construction of the Birch Grove Primary School. There was a meeting at the Department of Administrative Services where Mr. Diamantis was then in charge of the school construction grant program. And it shows that D'Amato Construction was there. That is months before there was a building committee. They were D'Amato Construction of Bristol, which is where Mr. Diamantis was originally from, just appeared at this meeting. And as far as we can tell, the town of Tolland had nothing to do with it. And in fact, we know that the superintendent told me last month, or told me in February, that that throughout this project, he was pressured to use D'Amato Construction and another Bristol company that had hired Mr. Diamantis' daughter, and that if they didn't, according to the superintendent, that the financing of the project would be in jeopardy, and the project of the school would not be completed in a timely manner.
Okay, and you actually
that's from the superintendent.
That's from the superintendent of schools, and you brought another interview. Well, I guess it wasn't an interview, but a meeting to light that CTN had on. This is a finance committee meeting on schools construction that just happened in March. State Representative Tammy Nuccio, who represents Tolland, speaking on this. We want to play that sound for you.
When I hear that it's the town's responsibility to make sure that the hiring is correct, but I've got the head of the state of Connecticut school building department sitting in a room with me saying, at 89%, I own this project. And when I have this same person saying, here is your team, here's who you will work with, or you will lose emergency funding status, or you will run over project and then the town is going to have to pay more. When I'm hearing those things, the fox is in the hen house.
Pretty strong statements there. Is she talking about Mr. Diamantis?
Yes, she is. I mean, he was the head of the school construction grant program. The 89% she refers to is that's how much of the project that the state was going to pay for. That was a very high amount for Tolland, but it was considered an emergency, and the school that they were replacing was not yet had not yet been paid for completely. So they were the state was increasing its contribution to 89%. And therefore, according to her, he was bigfooting her on throughout the project. And she's not only a state representative, but she was on the town council while this project was moving forward. And she was in the room. She had concerns at the time, and along with as did a few others, but no one acted on them publicly. No one in Tolland. I don't think she knew the details of. Sure. Of what we found out in February, but she certainly had concerns, and it was clear to her that the independence that a town usually gets to exercise in these school construction programs had been taken away from Tolland.
All right, Kevin, we have run out of time. I want you to stick around, though. We're going to do a web extra because I want to go through a few more of these clips, okay? So folks at home, if you want to go through the interview a little bit more, go on our website. Our interview with Mr. Rennie will be there, and there will be a web extra for the rest of our conversation. Thank you, Kevin. And make sure you check out Kevin Rennie's column in the Hartford Courant and his website, Daily Ructions. As we said, he's been closely following this investigation from the beginning. It is important to note that Mr. Diamantis has not been charged with any crimes. He denies all wrongdoing, and the FBI will not confirm the existence of an investigation. If you want to watch our two-part interview with Mr. Diamantis, where he gives his side of the situation, you can find that again on fox61.com or on the Fox 61 News app. This segment will be there as well, and we will see you back here next Sunday on The Real Story.